So, hey guys, today I am with Chris Crawford. Very happy to be with Chris. He is the owner of Spring Branch Air Conditioning and Heating out in Houston. Chris has a wealth of experience, and one of the big reasons why I thought Chris would be excellent for the podcast today is because prior to running his HVAC company, he was 20 years active military in the Air Force. And that experience really gives him a lot of unique experience and unique view on, running this type of business. So Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Very excited to be working with you guys. Excited to be on the podcast, and I hope that it's a good conversation, not only for us to have, but a good conversation for those that are listening.
Absolutely. So maybe Chris, you can give us just start off with a little bit of a background of yourself and your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Short elevator speech, right? Which everybody should have memorized. I started off in Central Texas, a little north of Austin, if everybody knows where that's at. Grew up in a little town called Killeen, Texas, right outside of Fort Hood. We were not associated with the Army. We just happened to live there. My family was kind of split. My dad's side of the family did general contracting work. We built custom homes from the ground up. And my mother's side of the family had an HVAC company. And so,
Mm.
uh, typical family business, right? When you're about 10 years old, they put you to work in the summer because you're big enough to finally carry things. And so it was always a contest between the two sides of the family as to who was going to get Chris as free labor during the summer.
Mhm.
So I did that until I graduated high school, joined the Air Force, and spent the next 20 years in the military, um, doing all kinds of crazy things. The bulk of my career was in aircraft maintenance. I did retire as a master sergeant and had a great time in the military. After the military, came back to Texas. I took over my family's HVAC business back in Killeen, as is sometimes typical of a family business. Sometimes mixing family money and business doesn't always equal the best recipe. And
Mm.
so we ended up giving the business back to the family, moved down to Houston. I've ran three very large AC companies as the general manager since being in Houston. After the third time around of growing a company that was ready to sell, I really didn't want to have anything else to do with that. So we purchased Spring Branch Air Conditioning, which has been around since 1956. We had a great time with the previous owner, to be honest with you. Just what a great guy that guy was. Mr. West was his name, and he made me promise that we would grow the company, but we would never make it a giant conglomerate. That was his one key point. He goes, "Never turn it into something that you couldn't show to your grandmother and be happy about it." Was literally the words that he used for me. But we bought the company from Mr. West. That was almost 4 years ago. Since then, we have grown the company, but we've been doing it very organically. And this is a long-term project for us, not a short-term project where we're trying to grow a company dramatically to hurry up and make a sale to an investment company. And so we're doing it the right way this time, and really enjoying ourselves while we're doing it, believe it or not. So.
That's awesome, Chris. There's so many different directions that I can go on from there. The first thing that kind of comes to mind is, you said that you're doing it, you're growing it the right way, which implies that there is a wrong way that perhaps a lot of people are doing. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. Like, what is the wrong way to grow these companies?
Yeah, well, I don't know that I would classify it as the wrong way. I guess the question is what are you trying to achieve, right? And so all three times when I was hired at the previous companies, it was, hey, Chris, we're a $2 million a year company, $3 million a year company. We want to grow as fast as possible because in a very short time frame, we want to sell the company to a private equity group. And
Mhm.
so
And you
in
generally
that
have to
case,
get $10 million to get a nice multiple, right?
right, you're trying to hit between that $8 and $10 million mark, sometimes a little higher, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And but you want to do it as fast as possible because usually when you're in that position, there's a reason why you want to sell. The owner wants to retire, or there's a reason there. And it's usually in the background that I'm not not always privy to, but the reason that they want to sell really isn't the problem. The problem is that they want to sell and they want to sell quickly, and so you've got to pull a lot of levers and push a lot of buttons to make that happen very, very fast. And so when you're doing that, you're trying to gain tons and tons of new customers but you're not trying to gain new clients. And I'll talk about the difference between that. In my company, you at Spring Branch, you will never hear us say the word customers. We don't have customers, we have clients. And the
Mm,
difference between that, I use the analogy of a gas station, right? Somebody drives into a gas station one time, they fill up their tank, they go inside and get a soft drink and a candy bar, and they pay for their purchase and they get out of there. That's a customer. And to be honest with you, they don't care if they ever see you again. They're not expecting to see you again, and it really doesn't matter to them. Where in our case, I'm not looking for customers, I'm looking for clients. I want long-term clients to build a long-term relationship with. I want clients that we've serviced their AC 15 years, 20 years consecutively. And we want that type of client to be on our books for a very, very long time. And that's the main difference between trying to grow it the right way or grow it the wrong way, depending on what you're trying to achieve. For us, this is a long-term project, and we want to be in business for the next 20, 25 years. I don't have any aspirations of selling anytime soon. And so we're trying to organically grow our customer or our client base the right way. And that's by maintaining them, treating them right, not overcharging them. We send technicians out to their homes, not salespeople who are trying to gouge them every time they turn around. And that gains respect from those people, and that's why they stay with us.
yeah, I love this. I love the concept of a customer versus a client, or a client versus a customer. And so you mentioned some of the things that makes that difference. You talked about selling tech, sending technicians to their house rather than salespeople. You talk about not gouging them. I know that, if like you ask anybody, if you ask any HVAC business owner, like, how do they do on their service side? They're going to always say, like, we're the best at service. It's like, and so like, if everyone's trying to do that same thing, how do you really differentiate? Or, is there anything else involved other than the pricing and maybe perhaps more sales pressure in terms of being, that client relationship versus the customer relationship? What else is
Yeah.
there?
Well, what we'll find in today's world, and don't get me wrong, AC companies have changed dramatically over probably the last 8 to 10 years. You never saw a salesperson, a quote unquote salesperson in an HVAC company 10, 12 years ago. These days, there's way more salespeople than there are actual technicians. They actively recruit people from other sales positions outside of the industry, car salespeople, real estate agent, you name it, right? Anybody who's good at having a really, really good conversation with somebody and being able to lay out what that sales process looks like, that's who people are hiring. The problem is that when you get a salesperson that shows up to a home and the HVAC system is not operating, and that salesperson doesn't have a real qualified background to be able to troubleshoot that system and then advise the customer on what an accurate repair would be. So typically what we see is it's the good, better, best, scenario where a salesperson will come in, they'll offer you a price for a repair, a price for a single component replacement, or for a complete system replacement. And 90% of the time, although I hate to use numbers, right? The vast majority of the time, people will pick the middle. I mean, McDonald's is the one who set that whole system up. Remember when you used to go get a number one on the menu and you just got a number one on the menu and they didn't ask you if you wanted small, medium, or large? There's a reason they ask you now if you want small, medium, or large, and that's because everybody will pick a medium.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be the cheap guys and pick the small, but nobody wants to spend extra cash and pick a large either. So that you always get a medium. Well, to McDonald's, that's an upsell, right? Because before everybody just got the same small fry and small Coke to go along with it, unless you had to ask for the large. Well, we've learned these things from from businesses like McDonald's, and now they offer you the good, better, best. But really, that salesperson doesn't have the technical background to be able to tell you what's accurately wrong with that system. Seen it too many times over and over again, where it could have been a simple capacitor replacement or a very small component replacement. And a salesperson was told them that, they need a whole new system or at least maybe a full outdoor unit. And it's just not the case. I don't want to say that they're being gouged. I think the problem is lack of training, lack of technical training in the industry. We worry too much about sales training and not nearly enough about the technical side anymore.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that part of generating or part of cultivating, a network of clients is really making sure that the people on your team, your crew, is trained on the technical side of things. Because like, look, upselling, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing like ethically wrong about that, giving people options, but as long as they're the right options. And what type of and I love the fact that you've helped, in addition to growing and being super successful with Spring Branch, you've worked in these three other companies, growing them from the GM position. And so I'm curious, when you approach training your people, like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned in your experience about how to make sure that the people on your team are well trained, and that they're well trained in the technical things, in addition, to doing the amount of production to make sure that you guys are profitable.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like we conduct sales training, right? Like we talk about sales and we talk about how to have
You
a
need to.
good conversation with somebody. Because otherwise, you know, uh, a normal technician, uh, while they are fantastic at working and doing the things that they do, it's very difficult for them to hold a good conversation with somebody, especially when it's telling somebody that they need to spend money. That's very uncomfortable for most real technicians, for people that grew up on the technical side of fixing and repairing things, and so that's hard for them. So we do conduct sales training, and that needs to be done just to get them comfortable with having a conversation with somebody and explaining what's really going on so that they understand it. From the technical side, there is nothing better for a technician than actually doing the work when it comes to training. Like, you physically have to have them with the drill in their hand and the screwdrivers, and doing the things that they do for training. Otherwise, you could talk to them all day about it, but they're never going to remember it when it comes time for them to be in the field to do it. And so the way to do that is to have training at the shop, with a piece of equipment, and tear it apart and put it back together again, and do those things that requires the individual to get a little bit dirty and to turn the screws and do what needs to be done so that they get the training, and to operate the equipment and do those types of things. We conduct a lot of training with our distributors, and with our manufacturers, because those guys are the experts on that particular piece of equipment, especially when it's a new type of equipment that's just coming out. For instance, we just moved from SEER rated equipment to SEER 2 rated equipment in the industry. And so all of our guys needed some training to figure out, okay, well, what makes up this new equipment? How is it different? And what things do we need to know? Coming forward in the industry, we know that we've got a new style of refrigerant that's getting ready to come out in the next couple of years. And so we need a lot of training on that. What type of equipment are we going to need? So we always are trying to stay on top of that. Something that we do internally that's way different than anybody else is that we train our employees to be successful personally. Um,
Oh
and, and
wow,
you're
love
not gonna
that.
and you're not going to see that very much, right? So we bring in people to talk to them about, how to buy a house, right? What does a mortgage look like? We bring in companies like Aflac to talk to them about what insurance looks like if you happen to get injured, either on the job or not on the job. We talk to them about what our 401k plan looks like. What does an IRA look like? What's the difference between that and a Roth IRA, and why should you know? And all of these things, from a financial aspect as well as a family aspect, about how to be successful in this world. And so, um, what we found is that not a lot of our technicians have a college degree, right? Most of them end up in this industry because they grew up around it. Somehow or
Sure.
another, when they were in high school as a sophomore, dad said you needed a summer job, and your friend's uncle was in an air conditioning company, and you got a job cleaning up the warehouse or something, right? And so the next 3 summers in a row, you did that again and again and again. By the time you got out of high school, they just ended up where you went. And so,
Sure.
somehow or another, you ended up in the industry. But most of them have a high school education, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that all the way through high school, what's the one thing they didn't teach you about? Money, right?
Finance. Yeah,
Finance.
that's
I mean,
right.
you might have had a class where they showed you how to balance a checkbook, but who uses a checkbook anymore? And
Mm.
so, and so we talk a lot about money and about finances and how to, do the right thing. And we throw Dave Ramsey books at them, uh,
Cool.
and, and all of those things to make sure that they're successful in their endeavors, right? Because, to be honest, the only reason they're working for us is for the money. They need to get paid, and they're trying to take care of their families. And if we teach them how to do that properly, they'll stay with us.
I'm curious about with this training, like how often do you do it? What's like the frequency in which, you're doing technical training or training, that will impact the rest of their life outside of work? Is this
Yeah.
like, every Tuesday and Thursday, we're doing it from this time to this time? Is it, just, whenever you think that they need it? What does that
Yeah.
cadence look like for you guys?
Yeah, well, we're in Houston, right? So we're very cyclical. So, between October and say April, May, we're nowhere near as busy as we are during the summertime. And so Tuesdays and Thursdays are typically training days for us. Now, when it comes to summertime, we drop that down to just Tuesdays. We just don't have time. We need to stay on top of it. So we're super busy during the summers, but once a week during the summer and twice a week during the off season.
I would imagine you want to keep these meetings kind of short. If you do anything over like 90 minutes, you're going to start seeing people's eyes glaze over. And
Not even 90 minutes, not even 90. And look, from somebody coming from the military, I hate meetings. I hate meetings. Most meetings can be done on an email or like we're doing right now on a Zoom call in 15 minutes and been done. And so, yeah, nothing more than 45 minutes. After that, people's eyes are glossed over, especially if you're there in the morning and they haven't had enough coffee yet. No, yeah, 45 minutes and you're done, in and out.
yeah, one of the things that you said that I wanted to touch upon was you're saying that, you mentioned that, that they, they're there for the money. But I know that, I mean, as a business owner myself, and, it's like people on your team, like the money is definitely number one, like they need to pay the bills. People need to eat, they need
Mhm.
shelter, all that other stuff.
Sure.
They need to provide for their families. But, especially in HVAC, where there's such a shortage of technicians, there's got to be those other reasons why people are staying with you versus, answering the hundreds of calls that they must, be fielding or receiving from people asking them to go to other companies. And so, what are in your experience? Because I know you've got a lot of experience with with recruitment. I know you've got a ton of experience with retention, based off our previous conversations. So when it comes to retaining, your techs and your skilled labor, especially after you're investing so much on them, what are some of the things that you've learned, to make sure that people stick with you long term?
Well, I wish I could say it was rocket science, right? But it's not. Like there's not some hidden secret. What you'll find when you go into most of these companies is that the owner of the company might show up around 10 a.m., right? And then he's usually gone by 1 or 2 p.m. And then if you're lucky as an employee, you might see him actually once or twice a week if you're lucky. Maybe in the training meeting that you're going to once, on Tuesday or something, right? But there's never that personal relationship. And to be honest with you, that's where the bulk of our employees stay with us is because of a personal relationship. I know everybody that works for me. I know their names. I know their dogs' names. We talk
Mm.
about their kids playing basketball last weekend and how they did in the game and who's going to go deer hunting this next weekend and just personal conversations and personal relationships with everybody that works in the company and if you will do that it doesn't really feel honestly like you're going into work, right?
Yeah.
It feels like you're going to your friend's house and you're going to hang out for the next hour and then we're all just going to go do some stuff, right? And so it
We're going to
happens to
make
be
some
that we're
money.
going to yeah, it just happens to be that we're going to go work on some air conditioners and fix some things, but it doesn't feel like you're going to work, right? Because we all sit in the office and we have a cup of coffee and we get our trucks ready and we make sure everybody's lined out for the day. In the meantime, we're bullshitting about all kinds of stupid things. And like I said, it's a personal relationship. Do I think that us having Blue Cross Blue Shield benefits and a 401k plan and all those things are beneficial and that probably keeps them. Yeah, sure, that stuff's beneficial, but everybody's got that, right? Like every single company that you're going to go to is going to have the basic same old package of whatever the heck that everybody offers these days. The question is do you wake up in the morning and hate to go into the office, right?
Yeah.
Is it a place that you want to go, or is it a place that you're happy going to? A place where nobody's up your case all the time, a place where you can go do the work that you like to do, and just be happy. And if that's the case, man, you're really going to have a really really good reason to leave before you make that decision to leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah, and it really, it has me, what you were saying, it's reminding me of this idea that, even with like a commoditized service, like there's a lot of people who build websites out there. There's a lot of people, who can install an AC unit. Um, you can't ever replace a person, like you can't ever replace a personality. You can't ever replace, like sort of like the ethos, the culture of an organization. It's like these are the types of people that work here. This is the type of organization that we are. And so, but in order to build that culture, it really just it goes from the top down. It's always about leadership. And
Right.
so I'm curious because when I think of leadership, the first thing that comes to my mind is the military. Like if any organization out there is, known for developing great leaders, it's the military. And so I'm curious, like has the military, impacted your leadership style? And then if so, in which way?
Oh, it is 100% where I gain all of my leadership ability from. I mean, they ingrain it into you from day one, right? And it starts with personal discipline, but um,
Amazing.
I'm the first guy in the office in the morning. I'm the guy that opens the front door. I'm the guy that makes the coffee in the morning. I've gotten in a good hour and a half to 2 hours worth of work before anybody thinks about walking in the door in the morning. I answer my phone, as you'll know, like literally, I interrupted our conversation a few minutes ago. I answer my phone when it rings, especially if it's my guys, some of the guys that are working for me. It's personal accountability on my part to start, right? Because if I'm not personally accountable for anything that's going on, how in God's name am I going to expect an employee to be accountable for what they're doing, right? So I'm the guy where it starts at, but yes, every last bit of it comes from everything that I learned in the military to be, how to be a leader, how to be personally successful, how to pass that knowledge on to others. If you talk to people that have been in the military and out in the field, they'll and you ask them, why did you do what you do? Why did you run out there and go risk your life, to do X, Y, and Z? And they're never going to tell you, oh, because I love my country, because of this and that. It was because I'm personally responsible for the guy next to me, right?
Mm.
Everything that I do is for the guy next to me. It's not for me. It's not for love of country. It's not love of whatever.
It's not the pay.
It's no, it's not. It's definitely not the pay. It was the camaraderie that you had with the individuals that were in your unit, right? Those people, the people that you're with 12, 14, 18 hours a day, every single freaking day. And you bond together with those personal relationships. And so, there's a reason why I say even in our business now at Spring Branch, that's what we cultivate is personal relationships, not just with each other. I mean, we cultivate them with each other as well, but we try really, really hard to cultivate that personal relationship with our clients. And so if they understand that we are people and we tell them our story, our individual stories, when we first started, I said, I'll give you the elevator speech, right? And everybody should have it memorized. All of my guys have an elevator speech and they all have it memorized. And every one of our clients get to hear it. So they know who their technician is and they start to develop a personal relationship with that technician. Most of our long-term clients, when they call in, they're going to tell you which technician is coming to their house. They will ask for a very particular technician. They're not going to leave it up to the dispatcher that answers the phone. Hey, I want so and so. Make sure that's the guy. Okay, well, we need to schedule it for Tuesday then. Okay, well, if he's not available Tuesday, then let's move it to another day. We hear that a lot, and so those personal relationships are vastly important to what we do.
Yeah, I know that I believe it's Service Titan. They have a feature where, when the tech is on their way, it's usually, they'll give like a picture of the tech and a quick bio and things like that, which I thought was an amazing touch. Could you
Yep.
give me just a couple of examples, or can you give, anyone listening, some examples of what makes like a good elevator pitch for your techs delivering to
Yeah.
customers? What does that sound like? What are some examples? What are some things that you've heard that really stand out? Like, oh, that was good.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. Most CRMs will do that now. They'll send a little text message that says your tech's on the way and little picture. And it's funny how the guys get excited as to what their picture looks like on the little photo thing. And I'm like, you guys are 35-year-old HVAC techs. Why do you care what the thumbnail looks like? But they do. It's amazing.
Yeah.
They it's amazing how much they model for their little photo shoot that day.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Um,
Suck
so
suck the gut in.
yeah, I know, right? Yes. So a typical elevator speech for us, first of all, it needs to be quick. The reason it's called an elevator speech is because it needs to be short enough for you to get on the elevator on the first floor and be able to tell the whole thing before you get to the third floor, right? So
Sure.
elevator speech, that's where the word comes from. And so a very quick background, where do you come from? How'd you grow up as a kid real fast? How the heck did you get into the into the industry? How did you end up at Spring Branch? Do you like it here? And what are you excited about moving forward? Hey, I'm a technician now. I'm planning on being a lead tech down the road, or what have you, and so really those 4 or 5 key little notes is really all you're talking about. Just quick background. How'd you get in the industry? Really love it here. Blah, blah, blah. Chris is the best owner ever. Blah, blah, you know what I'm saying? So those
Yeah.
types of things. Yeah. And so that's very fast elevator speech, just so, and if you have something, that's relative, like my guys, when they first walk in the house, they're going to look around real fast and see if there's anything relative. For me, it's super easy. If I see any military pictures on the wall, military insignias or anything, I know I'm in a military household. So we're going to talk about the fact that I was prior military, and the guys will talk about sports if they see anything for, Houston up on the wall somewhere from the Texans or something. They'll probably talk about the Texans and what's going on with the team. And so it's that type of interpersonal relationship, again, that we're always trying to find a good tie between us and the client, or even between us individually in the office.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, because, personally, this is one of, I think is probably like the big cornerstone of success, which is personal discipline. And, it makes sense that so many people coming from the military are successful with their next journey, their next endeavors, because, you sort of have that within the DNA. How do you cultivate, personal discipline within your team? Because I feel like there's such an intricate and delicate balance between, being too much of a hard ass and at the same time, like having, appropriate, reasonable standards, and so, is this something that you look for within your team? Do you try to just find it in the hiring process rather than trying to develop it later on? How does personal development through personal discipline throughout your team play out?
I mean, you'll find some of it in the hiring process, but I mean, if I ask a guy what his personal disciplines are, what he tells me and what's accurate is probably two very different things, right? And so
Sure.
you're always going to hear exactly what you want to hear in a job interview.
Funny
Um,
how that works.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing. So I would tell you, in the military, we did it with a big stick, right? We beat personal discipline into you. But then after a little while, everybody understood what the standard was, and it's the same standard for everybody, right? You know what time you're supposed to be here, freaking be here. Not only that, but if you're supposed to be here at 7, be here at 6:30. If you're not here at 6:30, you're actually late, right? And so that's the standard. That's the military standard. 30 minutes early for everything, period. And so, but everybody knew what the standard was. And so let's say, I'm Airman Basic Chris, and I'm not being super self-disciplined today, and I walk into the office at 7:15 instead of 7. It's not going to take much from the owner of the company to have to tell me that I'm 15 minutes late. Everybody in the room is going to tell me that I'm 15 minutes late, because
Hmm.
everybody there knows what the standard is, and everybody there knows that you didn't make it, and they're all going to let you have it, right? And it's a little bit of it's kind of half joking and half kind of beating you up a little bit all at the same time. But you won't do it again, I promise. And so,
Yeah.
I have a problem with the guys showing up in the morning at the right time? No, because because they know they're not going to have to hear it from me. They'll see the look on my face, but they're not going to hear it from me. They're going to hear it from everybody else in the freaking office. All of them are going to let them know, hey, you were late. Or, if you screwed up on a job site, they're all going to freaking razz the crap out of you about it. Like, you're going to get it. And so it doesn't matter. what those disciplines are. They all know what the standard is, and God forbid you mess up on the standard, because they're not going to hold back and let you know.
I love, I can hear in your voice, Chris, like this is like something so important to you.
Oh, it
And,
is. Yes. Yeah.
and what I also really love is that, the answer, what I'm hearing is it's like, it's a culture of discipline, and so how does that develop? You know what I mean? Do you just like
Yeah.
sit them all down and be like, guys, look, we're all doing this? Is it just you're saying it to, you know what I mean? Like, how
Yeah.
do you get the culture of that discipline in place?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the team. The team will hold you accountable. Right. Yeah. And after a while, you'll get voted off the island. Right. If you're not.
Sure.
So, I mean, how do we instill it? I mean, we've instilled it from day one, right? And so the guys, I mean, we've got technicians that have worked for Spring Branch for 20 plus years. And so it's just from day one, they knew what the standard was. And if you didn't live up to the standard, Chris would tell you that. And if you didn't live up to the standard, Chris would tell Marvin to tell JJ that he didn't live up to the standard. And
Got
so
it.
Marvin got really good at telling JJ, hey, you screwed up. And then JJ understood, hey, it's his turn to tell Miguel that he screwed up, right? The next time that came up. And so now nobody holds back. Like, you
Yeah.
screw up and it gets around the office that you screwed up, I don't really have to say much. The whole team's going to hold your butt accountable for it, and you're going to hear it from everybody. And then if it happens a second time or a third time, well, then maybe I have to have a discussion with you. But to be honest with you, everybody knows what the standards are. Show up on time, do the right thing, don't screw it up, do your paperwork. The job ain't finished until the paperwork's finished. Like, all of those things that we do day to day to day, all the stuff that's on our checklist of completion at the end of the day, all of those things have got to be done. And if you didn't do it, you're probably going to hear it from somebody.
I love that. And it's you can do it with the stick, and then you can also do it with the carrot also, because
Mhm.
praising people, rewarding people, showing recognition is also
Yeah.
like, I mean, you develop it in the exact same way.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of high fives that happen, right? When the things go right, and a lot of praise again from the entire team, not just from me. But when you do things right, and when you put team members on the same job together, right? When I've got 3 or 4 or 5 guys that are all out on the same job together, for an entire day. For instance, we just had to do a big plumbing job where we had to dig a 20-foot tunnel underneath the guy's house to go fix a repair job. And there was literally everybody that was out there, and, with shovels digging. And so, and it wasn't nice. It was nasty and rainy and muddy. And, but it's those types of things that when you go through those experiences, it's not just a crappy day outside. It actually turned out to be kind of fun, and we took a lot of pictures of the guys, literally covered from head to toe, and soaked in mud, and we had a good time with it. And and then you go to a restaurant, have a beer and have a hamburger, and you're a bunch of muddy slobs in a restaurant having a bunch of hamburgers and a couple of beers, and it's hilarious. So, but that's how you build camaraderie. And again, you're right, it's not just the discipline side. When you screw something up, you're going to get the praise for it when you do things right as well.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing place to work and an amazing culture that you've built. There's nothing better than some good old fashioned trauma bonding. As I didn't go, I wasn't I never served, but was in wrestling for my high school and in college. And there's something about starving next to somebody and having to go through that for a whole season.
Yes.
Can
Yes. When
definitely
you
bring
got
you
to
guys together.
when you got to cut that last 2 pounds, right, to make weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And train, because it's not like you're going to take a break from training. Right. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, when it sucks, and it sucks for everybody equally across the board all at the same time. Yeah, there's a little bit of bonding that happens typically.
Yeah, I really like this, the fact that you've emphasized multiple times, that it's equal, it's across the board. People know that they're not getting singled out with the discipline, that they know that this is just a universal standard. Because I feel like that's an important part of it, to really get people's buy-in and also make people feel like they're treated fairly.
Yeah, I've had the guys show up to the office with me not there. And if you think I didn't get a text message immediately, hey, why are you not here? And Well, because I had a thing and I couldn't get there, and I'm on the way, and yeah, yeah, there was some razzing, but
Yeah.
yes, yeah, it's equal across the board, me included. Yeah, let Chris screw something up and see if I don't take some of the heat for it. They will give it to me, I promise. So
Right.
typically when I take a phone call and put the address into the CRM system and they get dispatched to the wrong address, yeah, they almost always know that was my fault. So
Yeah.
I take the heat for that a lot.
Yeah, we all have things that we need to focus on, and that's the beauty of a business is, you know, the areas where we are less strong, you can have somebody where that is their strength, and that could be their role. You had mentioned in the tech elevator pitch, where, how they got into the industry, what they like about working for the company, and sometimes about like where they want to go, like what's their future plans. And I know for, many techs out there and many people like on the call, it's, what their future plan is to start their own company, to venture out on their own. And,
Yeah.
one of the things that, I mean, you've got a ton of experience with this in the different organizations that you've been a part of and helped grow. What are some of the things that people need to understand that they're getting into when they're considering, venturing out on their own?
Sure. Yeah, and we see this a lot. So technicians are in the industry. You've worked for a couple of different companies, maybe you've worked for 8 years, 10 years in the industry, and you're a fantastic tech. Your sales numbers look amazing. You make all of the right relationships with the clients, and all of that's amazing. But you're tapped out, right? You're a lead technician already. You may even have a little bit of responsibility as far as overseeing some of the younger technicians and maybe helping train them, but you're tapped out, right? Because you can only work so many hours in a week, and I get it. And so you've made the decision that you kind of want to run your own company. Well, that sounds great. The problem is that you can be the best technician ever, but you don't have any training or any experience in running a company, right? So there's a major difference between showing up, getting in the truck, showing up to a job site, doing all the right things, and showing up to the office, having to work in the office all day, answer telephone calls all day, input all the right information in the CRM system all day, make sure all the invoicing is done properly, make sure that the financing is done with the financing companies properly, paying the bills, making sure that the credit cards are paid, make sure the banks are paid, make sure the insurance guys are paid. By the way, do I know anything about insurance? Do I know anything about liability insurance? Do I need life insurance on myself to cover the business? Do I need vehicle insurance? Oh my Jesus, you know how many cars I've got to run out on the streets every day now? What do the insurances look like? Do I know anything about payroll? Do I know anything about payroll taxes? Do I know anything about human resources? Do I know anything about my liabilities if somebody's feelings get hurt tomorrow because of a conversation we had? Do
Mm,
I like the hundreds and thousands of things that could possibly come your way, right? What about the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, my TDLR regs? Do I have my licensing in shape? How much can that hurt me if a client is not happy with the job that we do? What happens if one of my employees screws up on a job site and we dump water into their living room and warp their brand new hardwood floors, right? How does that affect me as a business or as a business owner? What does Google look like? Do I know anything about the backside of Google and Google AdWords and all of the advertising stuff, that happens in the background? There's 1,000 things that you need to know that have jack all to do with working on an air conditioner. And so, being that you don't have that experience, I'm going to highly recommend that don't jump right out of a truck and start a business, right? You need to understand that in a lot of these companies these days, if you're really good and you really have a good conversation with some of your leadership and some of your managers, you can get into the management realm. Now, um, I've had conversations with technicians about this before, right? A good lead technician making 100,000 plus a year, easily in this market, 120 grand a year, if not better. And you're at the top of your game. But now I understand that I want to move over to the management side. Well, you're not at the top of the game for the management side. You're going to start at the bottom. You're going to start off with 5 technicians that you're going to be responsible for, and you're going to have to groom them and train them oversee their sales and oversee all of their KPIs, and all of that neat stuff has got to be looked after. And then from there, maybe if you're lucky, you'll run into being an installation manager, where I'm going to oversee 2 or 3 installation crews. And then I need to understand what that process looks like, right? Because involved in the installation process, now I get to understand what taking inventory means out in the warehouse. I need to understand what inventory is on their vehicles, how much inventory is going to be utilized on this job site. How do I figure out what gross margin and net margins are going to be on those jobs? Are we hitting the numbers that we need to make? Now you're starting to understand some things about how the jobs get set, right? About pricing and things like that. And then after there, then maybe you can become a service manager, where you're overseeing a bunch of service techs. Then maybe at some point you might become a GM or a general manager, where you're overseeing at least one whole department. Do that first. Do that for somebody else first. Learn everything that you can about how to run a business before you jump into it yourself. Why? Well, because if you jump into it yourself, you probably don't have $300,000 in the bank, right? You're probably going to have to go take a business loan to go get the whole thing started, or maybe to purchase an existing business. And now you're $300,000 in the hole. And if you screw it up real good, because you don't know what you're doing, you're going to be 300,000 in the hole without a business, because the business is going to go bankrupt. And so now you're in a lot of trouble. So what I would tell you is, go to work for one of these larger companies, learn and do the steps. But now remember, you're starting at the bottom. You're not going to, you're coming from 120K a year to 60K a year, and you need to be okay with that. And then build your way back up. And then at some point, once you've got it all down pat, now you can go start your own business. But the screw ups and the things that you did and the things that you didn't know and that you had to learn on the fly, and the things that you learned by effing it up really good, you learn that on somebody else's dime, right? Because you screwed up at that company and they reprimanded you for it, but you kept staying with it. And now you know not to do those things. Now you can think about maybe going and starting your own company, because you have experience in that realm.
Now, I can tell that you've had this conversation, about this topic a couple of times. And it reminds me of this idea that, sometimes you got to go slow in order to go fast. And people think like the fastest way to running their own successful business is to just go and do it. And that might be the fastest way to run a business, but not necessarily the fastest way to run a successful business. And you're probably better off, going slow might look like getting that, getting into those managerial roles first, progressing up that ladder, gaining those skills before you decide to eventually take the leap for yourself.
Yeah.
And I've seen it so many times where, you've got some companies where they've been around for, a decade to break $1 million. And they're like, we did it, and then there's other companies where they hit 5 million in, 2.5 years. And it's like, well, what's the difference? And surprise, surprise, the companies that are able to just, experience what appears to be rocket ship growth, level of growth, either one, they had just like a massively success, like talented leader. But most often than not, that's not it. Most often, it's somebody who had the experience. And if they didn't get that experience, directly in a company that they're working for, they were getting that experience in other things that they had done previously and, in their life.
Agreed. In fact, it's funny to me that you used a military quote there. Fast is slow, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast, right? And that's directly.
Say that again. I don't think I've ever heard that one.
Fast is slow, slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. You want to be smooth in your operations. Anything that you're doing, you got explosions going off behind you and people firing at you and all kinds of, yelling and screaming and all kinds of craziness happening behind you. You don't get flustered, right? Keep your cool, right? Because fast is slow. You're trying to move fast, and you're going to end up dropping things, and things aren't going to be right. And the things that you're trying to do, you're going to have to do them again because they were wrong to begin with. All right. Slow is smooth. Nice and slow means it's nice and smooth. Easy, easy, easy going. You only got to do it one time, and that's why smooth is fast, because you only got to do it once. Every step is just done one time. And
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. I think that is so that's so amazing. When you were explaining, Chris, the progression that you would recommend for somebody, I kept on thinking to myself, for the business owner, they got this catch-22 because on the one hand, they got their lead tech, probably the guy who's producing the most in the field. They know a lot, they're really, really great. They're at the top of their game. And this guy wants to manage the team, because he wants to get into management because, either he's going to manage your team or he's going to go out and start on his own. Right. But it's a catch-22 because, you could get lucky, I suppose, but, it seems like, well, he's either going to leave, but, who's to say that this guy is management material, for the business? It almost seems like you're going to lose your lead tech to get a shitty manager.
Well,
Am I
so
right?
there's ways to introduce that, right? So if I have a high producing technician that's doing a fantastic job for us, you're right. I don't want to lose that revenue income, right? He's probably one of my higher revenue producing individuals, and he probably doesn't want to lose his income either, right? And so I need to introduce it a little bit at a time. First thing you do is take a technician like that and put him in your dispatch area and sit him down in front of a computer for about 8 hours and tell him he's got to answer the phone and input the information into the system all day long. So for a guy that is a high producing technician, and you set him in front of a computer and a telephone for the next 8 hours, you're going to find out if he's going to stick with it pretty fast, right? Because that's like torture beyond belief for a technician to sit in front of a computer all day. And so you do that for like one day a week or twice a week. Hey, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're going to go sit in the dispatch and answer phones and input calls and that kind of a thing in dispatch. And if they can handle something like that a couple of days a week, okay, great. Well, then, let's toss you out into the warehouse for a few days so that you can understand what happens out in the warehouse, and that, we've got this delivery truck with equipment and parts and materials coming in today, and all that's got to be taken off the truck. It's all got to be accounted for. It's all got to go on the shelf where it's supposed to go. Everything's got to be inventoried exactly. All that information has got to be put into the computer. Again, that's freaking torture for a technician, right? And so if they start to understand that, hey, this is what managing looks like, right? It's not just Chris sitting in his office with a desk and, I'm drinking whiskey and
I'm
watching
watching
stupid
YouTube.
things. Yeah, watching stupid things all day that's not how it works. There's a lot of things to do, and none of that stuff's fun either, and so if they can handle that a little bit at a time, and then you can move them to something that's a little bit better. Hey, I'm going to give you these 3 techs, and it's going to be up to you to monitor everything they do all day long, and by the way, I need you doing your job too. And so, yeah, I'm still going to give you 3 calls a day, 4 calls a day, and you're still going to run out. And on top of that, you got to manage these guys, and you got 3 of them, and they're doing 3 calls a day. So that's your calls plus the other 9 calls, plus all of the paperwork, plus all of the inventory. So you've got to make sure that all that's done. And so you introduce it to them a little bit at a time, and that's when they'll find out whether they're cut out for managerial or not. And you will too. They're either going to handle that well or they won't handle it well. And then you do it, progressively, and see where it goes.
Yeah, that's great. And so, in your experience, what is the characteristics of somebody who's going to be successful in that, in that transition? Do you sort of like already know ahead of time, nah, this guy ain't going to cut it? Or is there, have you been surprised by anyone? What is usually, what are the characteristics of somebody who can be successful with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Sometimes, ahead of time, like, hey, you may be ready for it, 5 years from now, but you're not ready for it now. And sometimes you have to have that conversation, like, no, you're not ready. And then other times, yeah, you can kind of tell, he might do okay, but we're still going to test it and prove it before we do it, right? And so let's see let's see how it works for you. But really, the biggest thing is patience, lots and lots of patience. Being a manager, being a teacher, you've got to have that teacher mindset to where I'm going to teach you something today. It's never just mine. And it is really hard to be sitting in front of somebody and watching them doing something and letting them screw it up,
Sure.
knowing that they're screwing it up, just so that after they're done screwing it up, you can tell them to take it back apart and do it the right way again. For a normal technician again, that's just, man, it drives you crazy to watch somebody do that. You just want to jump in the middle and tell them not to do it. But you know that for them to learn it properly, you got to let them goof it up real good. And so, so having that kind of patience is probably the number one characteristic of somebody that's going to be a good manager and a good leader somewhere down the road.
Somebody who has that patience, we're able to step back, control themselves, and watch and really develop other people.
Yeah, and not lose your mind about it when something doesn't go right, right? Because honestly, that's where we see the worst managers in this industry, and we see a lot of them to where every little thing that doesn't go right, they just completely flip their lid, you know? And it's just it's sad. But again, that's usually somebody who, you know, wasn't brought up in the industry properly to understand that you've got to develop that patience as you're moving forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I think a lot about is, and we talked about this earlier about developing people from a personal level also. It's not only the technical skills, you mentioned like the financial aspect and things like that, but there's also just like a lot of interpersonal skills, and then also just like self improvement type skills, like a confidence in themselves, a certain degree of self control, a certain amount of emotional regulation, and like these are absolutely necessary. And not everybody gets taught this in their household that they're raised in. Maybe sometimes the opposite, and so
Yeah.
how do you deal with that? Because you're looking at somebody who's got potential, somebody who wants to be somebody who's got motivation, who's got aspirations, and you're just seeing a glaring mistake or deficiency in their personality. Can you fix that? Can you help them with that?
Yeah, you can. And we did it every day in the military, right? Where do you think all of the new recruits come from in the military? Like we didn't just get to hand pick and cherry pick the best guys, right? You got who you got. Like they just came in the door and you're like, I don't know who you are. I don't know where you came from. Your parents probably did a terrible job of of raising you. And so the first thing you do is have to tear them completely down until they're back to basic, right? And then that's why we call it basic training, so that you can train them in the way that you want them to be. And then from there, it's a little bit at a time, right? One little step, one little step, one little step. Here's what the standard is. You got to do it to the standard, and then hold them to that standard. Hey, this is the next standard. You got to do it to that standard, and just hold them to that. And it doesn't take much time. You'd be surprised. I mean, basic training in the military is 6 weeks, right? It's 6 weeks to take somebody that's 18, 19 years old, totally unlearn them everything that their parents taught them and start them back at basic, break them down to absolutely nothing, and then build them back into who you want them to be, which is very self-disciplined, understanding what the standards are and holding to that standard. And so, yeah, if we can do it in the military, there's no reason we can't do it in business. And that's kind of what we do.
How do you do that in business though?
It's a little harder with the 35-year-old that walks in the door, right?
Sure. Sure.
Somebody that's married with kids,
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
not
the
an
wife's
18-year.
gonna thank you though, for
Yeah,
sure.
right. And so it takes a little bit longer. But again, you establish what the standards are from the very beginning, right? And let them know, hey, this is what the standards are. This is how we do business. This is how we conduct ourselves. And there's a checklist of the things that need to be done and how it needs to be done and why. And then we consistently just hammer that home every day, every day, every day, every day. And if you're missing something on the standard, you get told about it immediately. And it's not disciplinary from top down all the time. Sometimes it's your subordinates telling you, "Hey, man, what the hell are you doing? This is not how we do that here." And that's okay. And everybody's allowed to tell everybody when they're out of line. And that's just kind of how we do it. It doesn't take long. We'll find out real fast if the guy's not going to make it in our organization, because they won't be able to handle that. The fact that they're taking criticism from literally everybody in the organization. They would expect it when the boss walks onto the job site, right? But not when their cohorts or their subordinates walk onto the job site. But in this company, if you goof it up and you're not within standard and you're out of line, you're going to get told. And so that's really kind of how we weed that out.
Chris, I just want to thank you so much, for the time, and sharing all of this. Like as a business owner myself, there's so much that I'm getting out of this call. And I really appreciate your generosity. I want to acknowledge you for your generosity, and sharing and just like this attitude of helping and giving back and all of that. So sincerely, thank you. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, how would they reach you?
Well, luckily, we're pretty easy to find. We're all over Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Spring Branch AC, super easy to find there. Springbranchac.com is the website. Literally, if you call there, it's usually my personal cell phone that rings, and you'll get to hear my lovely voice on the other end. So yeah, super easy to find us if you ever want to contact us for anything.
All right, Chris, stick with us for 1 second. I'm just going to stop the recording. Everybody else, see you next time.